Before we begin, I'll kindly ask everyone, if you haven't had the chance yet, to please turn your phones to silent. For all of us who knew Yury, he's a very thoughtful and mindful individual. And I think back to the interactions that I was lucky enough to have with him. Everything seemed to be intentional and specific. And as we'll go through this service and pay tribute and offer our support to Yury and the family, can I invite you all to be like Yury and be mindful and thoughtful and present and intentional about the next little bit of time that we'll be spending here together and seeing Yury off in this special way. We'll begin by reading some of the chapters that you can find in the booklets that are on the side of the seats. And this is an old Jewish tradition, and the mystics tell us that this gives comfort and support to Yury's soul. So I encourage you to either read together or to close your eyes and say a prayer of your own in honor and support of Yury. Adonai ma'onata hayita lanu b'dor v'dor b'terem harim yuladu bat cholel eretz b'tevel u'me'olam ad olam ata el tashev enosh ad daka v'tomer shuv v'nei adam כי 1000 שנים בעיניך כי אתמול כי יעבור והשמורה בלילה ימי שנתנו בהם 70 שנה ואם בגבורות 80 שנה ברחבם עמל ויבן כי גז חיש בנו אף על לבנות ימינו כן הודה ונביא לבב חכמה. Seek the Lord when he is found, call him when he is near. The wicked shall give up his ways, and the man of iniquity his thought, and he shall return to the Lord who shall have mercy upon him, and to our God, for he will freely pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, says the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. Enosh kechatzir yamav kitzitz hasada ken yatzitz, ki ruachav rabo v'inenu v'lo yakirenu od mikomo, v'chesed Adonai me'olam v'yad olam al yireav v'tzidkaso livnei vanim, v'orach tzedaka chayim v'derech nesiv al mavet. וישב העפר אל הארץ כשהיה והרוח תשוב אל האלוהים אשר נשנא מלב השמיים ממך לא חפצתי בארץ כלה שארי לבבי צור לבבי בחלקי אדוני אלוהים לעולם מה יקר חסדך אלוהים ובני אדם בצל כנפיך יחסיון כי עמך מקר חיים בירך נראה אור. Psalm chapter 1. אשרי האיש אשר לא הלך בעצת רשעים ובדרך חטאים לא יעמד ובמשב לא יצים לא יושב כי אם בתורת אדוני חפצו ובתורתו יהגה ימם ולילה והיה שעשו על פלגי מים אשר פריו ייתן בעיתו ועולהו לא ייבול וכל אשר יעשה יצליח לא כן הרשעים כי אם כמות אשר תדפן רוח על כן לא יקומו רשעים במשפט וחטאים בעדת צדיקים כי יודע אדוני דרך צדיקים ודרך רשעים תאבד. Psalm 15. מזמור לדוד אדוני מיגור באהלך משכון בהר קודשך הולך תמים ופועל צדק ודובר אמת בלבבו לא רגל על לשונו לא עשה לרעהו רעה וחרפה לא נשא על קרובו נבזה בעיניו נמאס ואת ירא אדוני יכבד נשבע להרע ולא ימיר כספו לא נשן בנשך ושוחד על נקי לא לקח עושה אלה לימות לעולם. Psalm 23. A song of David, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack. God causes me to lie down in lush pastures. God leads me beside tranquil waters. God restores my soul and guides me in righteous paths for God's name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your scepter and staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in full view of my adversaries. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of days. A few of the family members have prepared some words to say. I'll invite them to please come forward and share their thoughts.
We will be speaking predominantly in English, but before we start, we've got Russian translations for my speeches and Elizabeth's, which Nicholas will kindly give out to any Russian speakers who don't understand. I will say this in Russian. У нас есть русский перевод для того, что я говорю, то, что Алечка будет говорить, и Колечка сейчас раздаст русский вариант для всех, кто хотят читать по-русски, пока мы... Колечка, пожалуйста, встань, пожалуйста, и раздай. Perhaps while he's giving out, and Rachel also, thank you, while giving that out, I just want to respond to something that outside of the speech that Rabbi Shlomo had said in terms of doing things in a manner that my father would do it. And I just want to tell you that probably if he was in your shoes right now, he would also be a little bit late, but he also would have very good reasons for it. In the animated film Moana, in a song named Song of the Ancestors, the title character sings, "I am the daughter of the village chief. We are descended from voyagers who found their way across the world, and they call me." This lyric resonates with me because I have lived with a sense of pride that I was the daughter of a village chief. And needless to say, all of you here, and many who cannot be here today, are the people of our village. My father was not just a father to me and my brother and my sister, he was a patriarch, a father figure. In a long life together, my parents opened their doors and their hearts to many. People who thought they were just passing through our lives stayed. Of course they stayed. It was such a homely village. From the new immigrants who just needed somewhere to sleep for a couple of nights and then remained forever a part of our family, to the workmen who came to renovate their home but would sit with them every day with a good cup of coffee and a philosophical chat. Everyone, every one of you was always welcome. My father was a critical thinker, a scholar, and a moral compass. He was a man with phenomenally diverse interests and skill sets, from ophthalmology to theology, from computer architecture to carpentry. He stitched up my forehead when I was little. Папочка, пожалуйста, осторожно. He built the decking around my house when I grew up, and he always wanted to take over my school projects. But that is not to say that he was a serious man. Far from it. He was never far from a witty remark or a wordplay, even to his last days. He would always call out the ridiculous and the absurd. He loved a good laugh. He was a storyteller. He was a speech maker. He was a proud Jew, an ardent Zionist. At a very young age, probably around the time we moved to Australia, I remember him telling me how no matter where we live, Israel will always be our homeland. Some of the highlights of his later years were traveling to Israel to volunteer in the IDF, learning Hebrew so he could read the Torah himself, and having Rabbi Shlomo in his life to hold discussions about the Torah. He was a teacher. He loved nothing more than to sit with you, one and all, and tell you about life. How his eyes would light up when a child asked a question. From the weekend sessions with the then kids, Arosha, Billy, Punya, Danya, to the salon-style living room seminars when he would hold discourse, make us question the truths that we have always accepted simply because we were told it is so. Take us on a wild ride through biology, history, evolution, politics, religion, and ultimately make us wonder, What do we actually know? And isn't this world amazing? And isn't it wonderful that there is still so much left to learn? More than being a teacher, he loved being a learner. For his 75th birthday, we all received the following invitation texts. A birthday party with a rather impressive number of years is a good occasion to show off that we are all young and brilliant. As we all know, an old dog cannot be taught new tricks. It means that as long as we are able to learn new skills, we are not yet in this category. We are young, at least in our brain, at heart, and hopefully beyond. And at this invitation, we all learned new tricks and performed them at the party, and Mum and Dad danced a dance with such energy and sense of fun. And that was 4 years ago. Even if, as his illness took hold, for as long as he could read, he tried to learn Hebrew, keep on top of the news and world events, and wished to know more and more of the world because knowledge was his treasure and his legacy. I want to thank you all for being a part of our village, of our big family. I'd like to think that my Father's Spirit carries through you. Keep building his village. Keep your doors and your hearts open. So long as your mind lets you, keep learning and teaching and questioning. So long as your legs still carry you, keep on dancing. Thank you. My brother, up next. Thank you.
Yury Stanislavsky was a happy man. He married two great women, Galina and Valentina, who mothered his two daughters, Elizaveta and Alexandra, Liz and Sasha. I'm particularly familiar with Yury's second wife, my mother Valentina Gelfgat, who took Yury's last name when we immigrated to Australia in 1990. Valentina brought Yury into our family when I was 5 years old, and he quickly, very quickly, became a father figure to me. But he was different. He was a very experienced adult, but he had the sensitivity of a child. He had the most vivid memories of what it was like to be a child, to think as a child, and he had the most acute sense of childlike curiosity that did not diminish with time. In the Soviet Union, parents were often very strict with children, and his own father, Lev Viktorovich Stanislavsky, was strict also. But he himself was totally opposite. He had the utmost respect for the child's individuality. And he said yes to my questions and requests instead of saying no. Want to stay up late listening to adults talk into the wee hours of the night? Yes. Want to come and do your homework in the doctor's office while he's seeing patients? Yes. Want to come along on my work trip and miss a few days of school? Yes. There is a story there. In the Soviet Union, it was common for people to see each other off for travel. A friend would take a trip to the train or a bus station to simply see you off, go travel. And as Yury was leaving for a work trip to Dnipropetrovsk, now Dnipro in Ukraine, I asked if I could see him off at the intercity bus station. I can't remember what we were talking about on our way there, but it was so interesting that I did not want it to stop. And I said, can I come with you? I will not miss anything important in school. So he thought for a moment and he said, okay. We called my mother to tell her about this new development once we were en route halfway through. Did I mention that Yury married a remarkable woman? His friendship, and he did often call me drug brat, friend and brother, was immediate for me. 5-year-old me said to him, let's play a game, as if we are two kittens, Kotya, me, and Filia, you. In my mind, these were kitten names. Now, I've never met any kitten called Kotya or Filia since then. And she, Valentina, is our mother. So playing with him was always super fun, and the nickname stuck, and thus he was known as Filia to all family and many friends. But conversations with him were often serious, and they inspired my initial interest in physics. As many of you know, for a medical doctor, he had a remarkable mind for mathematics and science. But for me, the most impressive were his intuitive descriptions of complex phenomena. I still remember his explanation of the microscopic meaning of temperature. He was also my first tutor in computer programming, and he spent hours and days explaining to me the workings of Fortran 77. Recently, he explained to me that as a young man, he was hesitating whether to become a physicist or a doctor, ultimately choosing medicine. Especially in the later part of his life, his interest in physics took the front seat again. I looked at our correspondence over the last 2.5 years since his illness started. And since his operation, and it consists mostly of him watching YouTube lectures of science popularizers, Surdin, Popov, Semikhatov, and then sending me links to them, as well as countless science journalism articles. Big questions always interested him, and as many of you know, he instituted a series of bi-weekly meetings at Sasha and Amit's house with friends to discuss big questions, which lasted for several years. One letter in our correspondence stands out to me. This is the first letter that he wrote after his operation, when he already knew well that his condition was terminal. In it, he recalls a difficult bike ride that the two of us did when I was 8 or 9 years old. We rode to the village of Slatino, where Liz and Tanya Unterberger were working on a collective farm. And we went there to pay them a visit. It was my first serious bike trip on a highway. And he describes it as follows. I will read it in Russian first, and then I will translate. Ехали долго и трудно по жаркому холмистому шоссе. Потом свернули на проселочную дорогу. Там была большая скирда соломы. Мы засунули велосипеды под солому и залезли на скирду. Лежали рядышком на животе, наверное, в предзакатном солнце. И я сказал тебе, запомни этот момент. Все тихо, спокойно, и мы молодцы. Если у тебя в жизни будет тяжелый момент, тебе будет что вспомнить хорошее. С таким чувством я хочу уйти, и чтобы вы со мной расстались с таким чувством. Now translation. We rode on a long and hilly highway, and then we turned and took a path through the fields. There was a big haystack. We put our bicycles under the haystack and we climbed on top of it. We were lying side by side on our stomachs in the setting sun. I said to you, remember this moment. Everything is calm and quiet, and we feel good about what we have done today together. If you have a difficult moment in your life, you will have something good to remember. It is with this feeling that I want to leave, and it is with this feeling that I want you all to part with me.
it has been very overwhelming to think about what to say about a person that is larger than life. Phile never did anything by half. If he was a doctor, he was a surgeon, an ophthalmologist, an anesthetist, and a person who brought programming and laser therapy to his hospital at the time when people have not heard of either of those things. He did enough to fill several careers. If he was a family man, he had 3 children, 5 grandchildren, multiple nieces and nephews, by blood, by love, by friendship. If he traveled, it wasn't just to see sights, but to do his part for the IDF. We all know of his love of science and of people and of life, his leadership and his spirituality. So where does one start to say something that has not been said yet? When I'm thinking of the memories of my childhood, I remember his voice most of all. And that is not only because of the bedside stories, but because also of his love of poetry that he shared with me when I was still little. From Вересковый мед to Королевский бутерброд to Иосиф Уткин to reciting huge chunks of Evgeny Onegin by heart. Forevermore, I will hear them in my head in his voice. The voice of a brave old Pict proudly talking to the Scottish king, or the voice of another king only asking for a bread and butter. A few weeks ago, I don't remember how that came about, the 3 of us, me, Vaisa, and Phile, we started talking about love poetry and reciting our favorite ones. Even though he was already struggling with memory and remembering things around him, it was amazing how he was spot on reciting Mayakovsky and Yevtushenko, Bloch, and Burns. So I thought I would contribute to today's memorial in a way that would reflect that side of him by reciting 2 short poems, one in Russian and one in English. Геннадий Шпаликов, я к вам травою прорасту. Я к вам травою прорасту, попробую к вам дотянуться, как почка тянется к листу, вся в ожидании проснуться. Однажды утром зацвести, пока ее никто не видит, а уж на ней роса блестит и сохнет, если солнце выйдет. Она восходит каждый раз, оно восходит каждый раз и согревает нашу землю, и достигает ваших глаз, а я ему уже не внемлю. Не приоткроет мне оно опущенные тяжко веки, и обо мне грустить смешно, как о реальном человеке. А я осенняя трава, летящие по ветру листья, но мысль об этом не нова, принадлежит к разряду истин. Желание вечное гнетет, травой хотя бы сохраниться, оно весною прорастет и к жизни присоединится. And a poem by David Harkins. I couldn't find the lyrics for this one, so I'm doing it from memory and hopefully close to the original. You can shed tears that he is gone, or smile because he lived. You can pray that he will come back, or see all that he has left. Your heart can be empty because you can't see him, or full of the love you shared. You can remember that he is gone, or cherish his memory and how he cared. You can cry and close your mind, or do what he would want, laugh and smile. And now I'll ask Arosha to come and speak.
conveniently placed box of tissues here. That's good. Gosh, where to start talking about Fila? I was thinking about where he would start a speech. I think lots of us have heard him speak in the past, and often, he would start at the beginning, but the beginning for him would be way outside of the box of anything that you think the beginning is, and by the end of the speech, he wouldn't have shifted the paradigm, he would have shifted your whole perspective on the entire world. And that's the experience that I had with Fila quite often. You'd walk into a conversation very confident that you have a grasp of reality, you have some firm opinions, and then it turns out that he had the capacity to turn your world upside down. Not change your opinion, but change you as a human being for the better. A couple of years ago, we went for a drive. We went down to Locksport for a weekend, a place that he loved. And I mustered all the courage that I had inside me, and I turned on an audiobook about the history of the Mongol Empire. It was always very intimidating to bring something to Fila because he was so knowledgeable. And to his credit, it's a long drive. He lasted about 15 minutes before he said, "Look, Arosha, we have to turn this off because this historian, this journalist, which I respected previously, really doesn't see the bigger picture." And then proceeded to talk for 2 hours, and went well beyond the history of the Mongol Empire, the conquests, modern day geopolitics in China, you name it. And sometimes talking to Fila, you get sucked into the conversation and you think, there's gonna be a breakthrough. We're gonna discover something that nobody's ever known about the world, and you get to this question, and of course, all human knowledge has its limits, even Fila's, believe it or not. And at that point, he would say something to me, which I will say in Russian. It's a little bit funny in Russian than it is in English, but he would say, "Arosha, думать надо," when he came to a question that he didn't know the answer to, which translates into English as, "Aaron, you need to think about that." So, there was a lot of knowledge, but there was also humor, there was lightheartedness, there was always a poem, there was always a story behind the poem. And the last thing that I'd also like to talk about is sort of reflecting on all this. I also went through the correspondence. Fila did love an email back and forth. And looking through all of the emails, the thing that struck me, they lasted many, many years. And I was quite young when we first started emailing. And I thought, why would Fila, this person who has all of this experience, that has fled from the Soviet Union, lived in Italy, is a polymath by all accounts, multiple careers, take an interest in me? Take an interest in me. Initially an 8-year-old kid, later 12-year-old kid, not particularly smart, not particularly professional. And I think this was Fila's brightest quality. That he was able to take an interest in everyone and everything. And there was a great humility to that intelligence. So, if I could carry that spark with me, and that spark that he left with everyone, that little bit that he imparted onto us, then that's the greatest gift that he could have given me.
Hello everyone, I'm Oli, if we haven't met before. Sashka and Ayla, and I'm sure many of you know about a poem called If by Rudyard Kipling, which is just about it's a man giving advice to his son, and it's so evocative of the patriarch, if that's even an encompassing enough word to describe who Fila was. I'm going to read it in Russian. Apologies for lapse in pronunciation. О, если ты покоен, не растерян, когда теряют головы вокруг, и если ты себе остался верен, когда в тебе не верит лучший друг, и если ждать умеешь без волнения, не станешь ложью отвечать на ложь, не будешь злобен, став для всех мишенью, но и святым себя не назовешь. И если ты своей владеешь страстью, а не тобою властвует она, и будешь тверд в удаче и в несчастье, которым в сущности цена одна. И если ты готов к тому, что слово твое в ловушку превращает плут, и, потерпев крушение, можешь снова, без прежних сил, возобновить свой труд. И если ты способен все, что стало тебе привычным, выложить на стол, все проиграть и снова начать сначала, не пожалев того, что приобрел. И если можешь сердце, нервы, жилы, так зависти, чтобы вперед нестись, когда с годами изменяют силы, и только воля говорит: держись. И если можешь быть в толпе собою, при короле с народом связь хранить, и, уважая мнение любое, главы перед мольвою не клонить, и если будешь мерить расстояние секундами, пускаясь в дальний бег, земля — твое, мой мальчик, достояние, и более того, ты — человек.
Thank you, everyone, for digging deep to find those words to share with us all. I think the common theme is that Yury's had a tremendous impact on so many people, and that will, without doubt, continue to live through each and every one of us when we take those lessons to heart and reflect back. I have to say that I also had to refer back to my inbox and reflect back on some of the email correspondences that Yury and I have had over the years, and found it quite insightful. And I was thinking that, although we've heard of the diagnosis 2.5 years ago, and he's come an incredibly long way, that this was the week in which he's physically parted with us. And in the synagogue each week we read a different section of the Torah, and this was often a point of contact that we would have and discussion point that would often flow. And it struck me that this week we read about a character whose name was Bezalel, the son of Uri. And his character in the Bible was one of art and creativity. He was responsible for the design of the temple, of the tabernacle, which was the first form of a place, a house of prayer for the Jewish people whilst they were still traveling through the desert. And everything, no doubt, happens for a reason. And, Bezalel, the son of Uri, becomes this figure in the Bible to be an inspiration for art, not art in and of itself, but art for how it inspires creativity and life within us. And I also reflected back on the first little exercise that Yury and I had together, and I shared this with you earlier in the week. He was so passionate about this one paragraph that appears in the Siddur. Many congregations read it on the Sabbath. It's called the Adon Olam. And we would sit and I'd read, and he would want to understand the Hebrew words, and I'd translate it into English, but he would want to understand it in the original Hebrew and the formation of the words and the meaning behind each and every one of those letters. That was the very first encounter that we had. And then looking through that inbox, I chanced on a YouTube clip that he sent me from this trip that he had in Israel. I think it was in 2019. And I must have forgotten, because I didn't recall this particular episode. I played the video, and he's sitting, he writes to me, I took some of those words. He says, here's a video clip. Every day here brings something remarkable, bursts of love and enthusiasm. A little video was shot in a hall in Tzfat, and later that day he had the Yom HaAtzmaut celebrations in the Avnei Moshav. He writes, absolutely fantastic, followed by a gorgeous synagogue service. And I just have to depict to you what happens in this video. So there you've got Yury sitting on two sides of him, two very Hasidic-looking individuals with these long payas coming down. And they say in the video, Yury, what's the song that you'd like to sing? And he says, the Adon Olam. Have you seen this video? I have to share it with you. You got it? Oh, okay. And they continue for the next couple of minutes to sing through different tunes, and you could see as Yury is so passionate and so involved in this beautiful song. It's a work of poetry. It's a very powerful little paragraph. And earlier this week, as we stood around, we once again read this little paragraph. So I just want to conclude with reading the last little bit, because I think it's very contemporary and applicable, and I'm sure Yury would approve. The last little bit of this paragraph is V'hu Eli v'chai go'ali. I'll say it in Hebrew and translate it in English. V'tzur chevli be'et tzara. V'hu nisi umanot li minat kosi b'yom ekra. B'yado afkid ruchi be'et ishan ve'a'ira. V'im ruchi giviyati Adonai li v'lo ira. He is my God and my ever-living Redeemer, the strength of my lot in times of distress. He is my banner and refuge, my portion on the day I call. Into his band I entrust my spirit, when I sleep and when I awake. With my soul, my body too, the Lord's with me, I shall not fear. And if this could be our parting words to you in a physical sense, Yury, that v'imruchi giviyati, when it comes to the end of physical life, God's with me and I have no fear. We'll continue to live the life that you fought for and you championed and you inspired each and every one of us, and we'll continue to do that through the length of our days. I'll kindly ask everyone to please rise for the memorial prayer. Ehel malei rachamim shochen b'amromim hamtei minucha nechon al kanfei ashchina b'ma'alot kidoshim utehorim kizor harakia mazhirim et nishmat Yury ben Avram she'alach le'olamo ba'avur she'anachnu mitpalalim b'yad askarat nishmato B'gan Eden tehei menuchato, lachen bal harachamim, yastirehu b'seser kenafav leolamim, v'yitzror b'tzror hachayim et nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar. Amen.